What's up, friends? Welcome back to my channel. If you're new here, my name is Pam, and today I have some tips for you to speed up the ripening of your tomatoes because we are running out of growing season, at least here in Massachusetts in Zone 6B. I'm right on the border of 7A, so it's, I might have a few more weeks, maybe 30 days at max to grow some cooler weather vegetables, but overall, we are running out of time. I still have a lot of produce coming in from the garden right now, so I'm also going to talk to you a little bit about how I'm preserving and saving a lot of that stuff. I will try to do a more in-depth video on that later, because today we're really going to focus on topping tomatoes and how to prune them so that you can get them to, hurry up. So what exactly does topping mean? It just means cutting off the growth tip of your tomato. So the part at the very end of each branch would be your growth tip. A lot of times there will be flowers there or very small fruits, and if you're in about this time of the year, they're probably not going to make it all the way to maturity. So there's really no point in having the tomato plant focus its energy on maturing something that's just not going to have time to make it. So that's why you want to cut things like that off. So by cutting off these growth tips and all the little fruits and flowers that are never going to make it, you're sort of forcing the tomato plant to focus on the tomatoes that you would like to eat. I apologize, my neighbors just keep mowing the lawn every time I turn this camera on, so I'm really gonna hope you can hear it. So another thing that I'm doing with these tomato plants late in the season is I'm going to be defoliating them quite a bit and taking a lot of the leaves off. Again, it's just more stuff that the plant is going to be focusing on maintaining. You of course want to leave some leaves though, because that is what is taking in energy from the sun. It's not the fruit that's doing that, so you don't want to cut them all off. Gardeners do this all differently, so I'm just going to show you how I'm doing it right now. I reserve the right to change my mind in the future. That's the thing about this channel, is I'm just going to be showing you what I'm doing, what's bringing me success, and as I learn more tricks, I will pass them on to you guys. So the final thing I'm going to be removing, obviously, from these plants is the suckers. And if you don't know what a sucker is, I will show you. It's basically, it can be its own whole tomato plant. So early in the spring, if you want to actually root these, you can have extra tomato plants and you can sort of use them to succession plant so that you can spread your harvest out, especially if you're in a longer growing season. I did attempt this year, early in the spring, and the tomato plant never quite made it to maturity. So it might be a little bit difficult to do if you're in like zone 5 or 6 or 4 or even higher than that. But if you're in one of those lower zones, that's a good little trick for you to, have a lot more tomatoes without having to start everything from seed. So one thing I probably should have mentioned from the jump too is that there are two kinds of tomatoes. There is determinate and there is indeterminate. So a determinate tomato is going to grow to a certain size and it's just going to stop growing. What I tend to end up planting a lot of is indeterminate tomatoes, and that can cover your cherries, your Romas, your slicers, any of them. And those will just keep growing until disease and cold takes them out. So those are the plants that we're going to be really pruning throughout the year, as well as very heavily at the end of the year. So if you're dealing with tomatoes that are still growing at this point in the year, you probably have an indeterminate tomato variety. So now that we're going to start trimming the tomato plants, and I'm going to show you on screen just as I go through, and you can see the things that I'm taking off. I've found, big, huge branches that were actually just a sucker that didn't have any fruit growing on them at all, so I just took those right off. And between plants, I am always sanitizing my snips. I use either rubbing alcohol or hydrogen peroxide. I'm not really sure which one's better. I just kind of use whatever I have on hand. And just to clean what you can off of the snippers before you go to a new plant. You definitely want to be sanitizing your snips in between your tomatoes and other plants just to avoid any kind of cross-contamination. It's just a really good habit to get in. I keep a little glass spray bottle in my tool belt that I use when I'm gardening. And of course, jumping off the disease aspect of tomato pruning and care, you're also always going to want to remove every little bit of foliage that you have snipped off that has fallen down into the ground. You want to get rid of that, throw it out. Don't even put it in your compost unless you have one of those compost piles that really heats up. I believe then you can compost things that have like fungal problems and stuff, but I just throw everything right in the garbage. I don't want that going back into the soil, as it can overwinter there and infect your plants the next year. And that's actually why people tend to advise new gardeners to rotate their crops around just to avoid passing disease on. But obviously that's not possible for everybody. A lot of us are working with kind of small spaces. And if you're like me, you put a tomato in every single bed for some reason. So now I will show you what the tomato looks like now. You can see that I have removed a lot of the foliage, I've cleaned up any suckers, I've taken off unnecessary branches, and I have topped all of the growing tips. It's been about a week since I pruned those tomatoes, and I have already pulled 2 that are starting to ripen off the plant this morning, and there's another few that are starting to blush. And just a helpful tip, if you do end up getting down to the wire and your tomatoes are still not quite ripe, if they have even the slightest amount of blush on them, and that just means a little bit of a color is coming, you know, and taking over the green, usually it starts up near the stem. And if you see any of that, just this shift in color, is very likely that the chemical reaction that causes the tomatoes to ripen has already started, and you can actually take them inside and ripen them on a windowsill or in a paper bag. I've done this with almost all of my Amish paste tomatoes this year, and they are still absolutely delicious. It's a very easy way to deal with tomatoes that split very easily, or if you know there's a large amount of rain coming that, you know, it's gonna make for an inconsistent watering with your tomatoes, and they're probably gonna split. It's a good idea to just pull them early and let them ripen on the countertop. And if all else fails, you can always make fried green tomatoes. I've never done it, but people swear it's good. I'm sure it is. I'm sure I'll end up trying it because a lot of my tomatoes still aren't ripe. So what about other plants? Well, you can also do this with another nightshade plant, and that's peppers. So if you find that your peppers are not ripening fast enough, and that is definitely the boat I am in right now, you can also top your pepper plants. And it's the same thing, you're just cutting off above a node at the end of a growth tip. You just want to take the plant's ability to continue to get bigger away from it, and then hope that it focuses its energy on ripening those fruits so that it can get its seed in its brain, and you can eat your peppers in their full glory. Have not done this yet. It's hard. I don't know why I have such a hard time topping my pepper plants, because they just keep growing all the way through the end of the season, you know, and you're just filled with hope. Like, maybe they'll make it. Maybe it'll happen. But the good thing about peppers is they're really good when they're still green, so you're really not missing out on too much if they don't all ripen by the end of the season. And very quickly, I just want to show you some of the ways that I have been preserving the food that I've been bringing in from the garden, specifically my peppers and tomatoes. Obviously, I grew a lot of paste tomatoes this year. I really wanted to focus on the Amish paste and just have cherries and a couple of slicers to supplement that, but mostly I wanted sauce tomatoes, and I had this idea in my head that I would be preserving all these cans of sauce, but of course it's taking the plant forever to ripen, so I have not gotten there yet. But I have made several things with my tomatoes. One of my favorite ththings to make is a galette. It's kind of like a pie. It's like a crusty butter crust that you sort of fold over. If you've never had one, they're so good. And this one that I make, I will link to the recipe down below. It's just a recipe I found on a blog. It's got honeyed goat cheese, and of course if you're a vegan you can substitute that for like pesto or something like that. So this one that I'm gonna link you to is delicious. It's like a layered tart. It's got honeyed goat cheese and then caramelized shallots or onions, and then you just put the slices of tomato over it, fold the crust over. I also made my first batch of hot sauce. Finally, after years of wanting to do this, I'm so excited. I made a peach habanero sauce, and that was the first one I've made. So good. I will also link to that recipe down below. I used a little bit less peaches because I saw in the comments that it was kind of sweet. And it was, oh my God, it's just delicious. The habaneros are nice and spicy, but they're a very like front mouth spice. If you're into spice, you know what I'm talking about. And it does fade fairly quickly, so you're not like in agony or anything, and you can really taste them. It's so good. I think next I'm gonna make another habanero hot sauce because I'm like up to my eyeballs in habaneros, because I also have habanadas, which I've showed you guys on the channel a couple times, but if you didn't see it, they are heatless habanero peppers. They're so good. They have all of like the flavor of a habanero with none of the heat. So it just makes for a really tasty, like regular old pepper. So I'm thinking that I may use a blend of the habanero and the habanada to see if I can stretch out the batches a little bit and also cut the heat down a bit. I don't mind spicy, but it's nice to have something a little less aggressive for, you know, company. I've also been drying my red chilies. 2 years ago, I grew cayennes and I had a pretty good harvest, and I ended up drying them in my, at the time, brand new dehydrator. I have an Excalibur one and I'm pretty happy with it. Still doing really well after a couple of years now. So I dried all of those and I crumbled them and just had red pepper flakes in the cabinet in a nice big jar. my partner really likes them and I like them too, so it's nice to have something that I grew and I knew what went into it. I dehydrated myself. It's very satisfying, very satisfying. I'm definitely 40. Some other things that I have from the garden that have been stored long term are like the garlic that I didn't manage to make moldy. We'll talk about that another time because I'm still upset about it. But the garlic that did not get moldy, I roasted, and then I froze all of the cloves in a jar, and they actually cut up really nice even when they're frozen, and they've just been amazing, and I've been adding it into everything, and I haven't bought garlic in quite some time, and I've got a little while longer before I run out. It does pain me to know how much more I would have. They were so beautiful. I cured them wrong. I also harvested a ton of onions, and I cured those correctly. So I have like a whole big basket of onions, and I've been using that, and I'm gonna pull some more onions. There's still a few straggler onions out there, so I'm gonna pull those, and I'll probably chop and freeze some. I'll probably chop and freeze some peppers too. And I'm just like overall very excited to, you know, be stacking jars of tea and herbs and all kinds of stuff that I can use for the rest of the year. So I want this great feeling for all of you, so I hope that this channel brings you a little bit of ideas and inspiration, and if you're new here, hit that subscribe button. That would be super nice because I'm like on the road to 20K, which is bananas, so I would love to get there in the next couple of months. I think that would be really cool. Big shout out to my patrons. I love you all. Thank you so much for basically sponsoring this channel. Thank you very much, and if you'd love to join, check out the information down below. It's only $2. Okay, guys. See you soon.